right, good morning to those of you who might have joined. We'll give it maybe 2 more minutes to see if anyone else comes on. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. So today's workshop will be a bit different than the workshops we've had previously. This workshop will be less focused on going through the application and some of the background, and more focused on kind of frequently asked questions and Q&A time, so that we can get kind of those last minute questions addressed before the applications are submitted. Start out just as a reminder to read the guidelines, and they're posted at rails.innovatesac.org. So definitely give those a read over. They'll, I think, address a lot of the questions that folks have. That's just a friendly reminder. So today's agenda, we'll start by going through the application changes. There was some confusion around those, so we wanted to take an opportunity to just address those with this workshop. Then we'll go through some of the frequently asked questions we have, and then we'll have the final portion, which is Q&A. And then, you know what, I'll pull up the Q&A feature so that those questions can be submitted. They'll be submitted at this link here, or at that end portion. All right, so we'll start with the application changes. To begin with, we limited some of the word count questions. Previously, we were not aware of how to edit the word counts in the Google form we were using, but we had a few people submit applications that were over the word limits, so we made sure to build that into the form where you were not able to enter more words than the is required. So you'll get an error message. It won't let you submit it if you enter more than 300 words for the long description, or 100 words for the impact questions. The next change was making it mandatory to select a priority neighborhood or none above. Previously, this was an optional question. If you didn't select one of the neighborhoods, you could just skip over it, but we want to make sure that it was not just skipped over and that it was a question that was addressed. So now if you don't select it, or if you don't have a priority neighborhood that you're targeting, you'll be required to select none of the above. And the next change was changing the wording around the 1,000-strong employer question and having a reminder to include $4,000 in your budget summary. So this question was a little vague before, and it kind of gave the impression that you would have to be a 1,000-strong employer currently. So the question now is framed that whether or not you'll be taking on an intern as part of your project. So we had a typo that was pointed out during both workshops around the dates. We made sure to fix that so that they were accurate. Pretty self-explanatory. Also, we added some sample wording for grant categories. This has been something we've gotten many questions on, so we wanted to make sure that in the actual application, there were descriptions of what each grant category is about. So the acceleration grants are about startup training and development programs, kind of broadly. In the guidelines, it's defined as accelerators and incubators. However, really in a nutshell, those are startup training and development programs. Innovation grants are for community hubs and startups under SETL, and leadership grants are for educational and STEAM programming. And that's not just for youth, that's also for adults. For further clarification, please read through the guidelines because they're a little bit more descriptive. But when filling out the application, even though it would probably be in your best interest to read through the guidelines and know what your answer will be before you begin filling out the application. But if you do not, those descriptions are there to help you out. So the other change is changing the focus areas to SETL verticals. So we took out the startup enablers and social entrepreneurships as standalone focus areas because the grant program is focused around SETL and building up SETL. We wanted to make sure that was what the focus areas are around. So there's been some questions around, well, what if I'm not specifically working on a SETL vertical? If there's a way to connect into a SETL vertical, that's the vertical that you should be marking as your focus area. So if you're doing game design, you connect in with IoT cybersecurity. If you're doing solar panels, you can connect in with clean tech, sustainability, etc. So that will be, you can put in a little bit of thought. Say maybe even your project addresses homelessness, that might be another one. You find a way to connect to one of the verticals, such as mobility or something like that. All right, so now we're going to go through some of the frequently asked questions. These are questions we've gotten several times, and we just want to make sure that we explain the answers in kind of a wider format. All right. Question 1, am I eligible for a grant? So this is usually including my program does this. Am I eligible to apply for a grant? We take care of this, or we are a nonprofit, etc. Are we eligible for a grant? The easiest way, in my mind, to address this, unless Ash is a better answer, is to kind of look through the guidelines at what, keeping in mind what your project will be, and see if it fits. So the main sections that are kind of address this are the purpose section, the kind of initial scoring guidelines, which are also known in the guidelines as the minimum criteria, and the initial scoring criteria, because these kind of give you what we're looking for to say whether the project is eligible within Rails. So if you can find a way to connect in with those three sections, then your project is likely eligible. Whether or not we can say it'll be funded for sure, we can't. because there will be a review panel who will score them and determine who will get the awards, but as long as you fit within those categories, you're eligible. And question 2, do in-kind contributions count for the one-to-one matching funds? And the answer is no. Even if it's someone paying for something such as tenant improvements, the one-to-one matching funds are meant to be kind of a cash match that is able to fill in a need if you are not able to get the full amount of funding. So if the funds are already, if they're pledged by someone for a specific purpose, they're an in-kind contribution rather than a cash matching contribution. All right, question 3. Can I put up the funds for the one-to-one cash match myself? Ash?
And the answer to that is yes. In line with the previous question, we just want to make sure that those funds aren't like predetermined to be used for a very specific purpose. The idea behind a cash match is it can be moved around to fill multiple areas of need within the project. But yes, the funding, as long as it's cash, can come from you, the applicant.
Question 4. Can matching funds come from multiple sources, or does it have to be an individual source?
Yes, the funding can come from multiple sources.
All right. Question 5. If my organization is not based in city limits, can we apply for a grant? The answer is yes, as long as your project is is either located within the city or is targeting a population within the city. City proper, not unincorporated county. So, yes. Question 5. Can collaborating organizations submit multiple applications for the same project?
No. That's right. Yeah. No, really, there's 2 limits here. One limit is really 1 application per organization. And then the other limit would be if you're working on the same project, just submit a single application and just identify that multiple organizations are contributing.
Similarly, question 7, can my organization submit multiple applications for different projects?
No, 1 application per organization, please.
Question 8, what is the difference between a grant category and a focus area? So this is one that has definitely caused a lot of confusion. So what we'll say is the grant categories are set based on what we're trying to fund with those specific grants, and have different monetary limits based on which grant category it is. The focus area is more focused on kind of the subtle piece where we're wanting to get a variety of projects and also get an idea of what's going on in the city and how we can better support it moving forward. So the focus areas, the grant category is important to figure out the level of funding you're getting and for us to understand like what type of project you're doing. And the focus areas are kind of our way of getting information about what's going on in Sacramento. Question 9. If my application is under the wrong grant type, will you change it? Yes, we will. It is important, though, to figure out which is the best category for you because each has their own grant limits. And if we have to adjust your application, we may also have to adjust the funding amount. So it is a good idea to make sure that you're applying under the correct category when submitting your application because the funding does depend on that. Question 10. If I make a mistake on my application, can I fix it? Yes. After you submit your application, you'll receive an email with a link to be able to go back and change your application. However, there may be an issue with re-uploading a budget document. If that is the case, you can send us an email, and we'll show you our email on the next screen, and we'll upload the document to the application for you. All right, so those are the frequently asked questions. Just wanted to share a couple resources with you before we go into the question and answer portion. We've got the links here for the application portal, our online Q&A section, which is also in the description of this video, our Facebook group, the link to the guidelines, and summaries of previous Rails grantee projects. We had a few questions about that. We wanted to make sure that those were available. And then we've got the links here for previous workshops. And then if you need to reach out to us, we can be reached at mofi@innovatesac.org. All right, now is the question portion, the Q&A portion of our did I mess it up? Okay. All right. Our indirect costs and allowable use of funds.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think sorry, let's back up and just say initially that would be allowed to be included in the budget. So it's definitely eligible. From a city standpoint, we obviously want to invest these public dollars as much in the delivery of the project as possible. So when evaluating that portion of your budget, you know, something that we imagine the Mayor's Tech Council will be looking at is, you know, whether the amount of indirect costs is justified by the scope of the project, and whether or not there are alternative approaches to that. So the straightforward answer is yes, they're allowed, but you know, they're going to be evaluated on sort of a case-by-case basis.
Right. Could you speak about the background of the judging panel in terms of expertise?
Yeah, so the Mayor's Tech Council, you can actually check out their bios at innovatesac.org. I don't have the exact page for you at the moment, but I think if you click under About, you'll see a link to the Mayor's Tech Council. All their bios are posted there. These are basically leaders in mostly technology as well as entrepreneurship and startups within the community, and so it's a wide range of backgrounds and sort of areas of expertise. And so you can check out the website again, innovatesac.org, to find the Mayor's Tech Council and see their bios.
Can you clarify what to answer for who is the project's leadership team involved in this project? Should we name the organization here, or should we provide individual names?
Yeah, so the leadership team is really referencing the individuals. So, you know, we would have caught your organization name previously in the top part of the application. So this is really just an opportunity for us to learn more about the individuals who will be leading the project and what their backgrounds are.
regarding budget, is there an expected ratio for budget categories? For example, labor costs should not be more than 40% of the total budget.
No, there's no limit there. Again, with the previous question about indirect costs, so the way this is going to work in terms of the evaluation, most of the criteria are really based on some of the qualitative aspects of your application. So really what the Tech Council is going to be looking for is your project like something that really highlights the purpose and intent of both the city's Innovation and Growth Fund as well as the Rails program. Once they do sort of the deeper analysis, at that point they would start looking at the budget, and of course, what we want to see is that you're proposing a budget that's realistic in terms of matching the scope of the project. And so if it, and that could affect your credibility if, for example, if you're proposing a really unrealistic budget, or let's say like somebody's getting a super big salary, that's probably not something that the city is going to want to fund. It's not only a good use of city dollars, but it doesn't make us look good in terms of trying to support these projects. So there isn't a super clear answer on that. I mean, other than there isn't a set requirement, but the budget will be evaluated, and for some reason the project is really, really good, but there's something off in the budget, the Mayor's Tech Council could say that they want to support the application, but they could suggest or recommend changes to the budget. And obviously, as a grantee, you would need to agree to that before we moved on to the contracting part. So that's something that can be negotiated later on.
Would you please define partnership for grant eligibility? This is referring to a limited liability partnership as a corporation or a community partnership. Is this referring to limited liability as a corporation or community partnership?
So I assume that's referring to, there's a question, well, there's two things. One is in the criteria that we have, community partnerships and collaboration is something that would strengthen your application. I believe it's 15% of the application score. I'd have to go back and reference that specifically. But that is not referring to the organizational structure, which would be like an LLP, as mentioned here, a limited liability partnership. What we're looking for are who are some of the community organizations that you're proposing to partner with in the delivery of your project.
We have a collaboration of public agencies, nonprofit, and educational public entities. Would this application limit our public education partners to only being able to apply to this program, even if they're not the lead?
No, as long as they're not, I think a good rule of thumb would be as long as none of those organizations is receiving more than 50% of the budget that's being proposed, then that organization could be eligible to submit its own application. But the caveat there would also be that the expectation would be that if the organization is listed as a collaborator on one project and then they're submitting an application for another project, that project is totally different than the project that they're listed as a collaborator on. We understand there are a lot of organizations doing really cool work, and we want to see these types of partnerships. Really, the spirit and intent behind the rule of limiting one application per organization is just to make sure that you're not trying to jam us with a bunch of applications to maximize the odds of you receiving funding. That is exactly what we're trying to avoid. And so as it pertains to this particular question, we wouldn't interpret an organization that's listed as a collaborator and applying through a separate application to be trying to game that requirement of one application per organization.
Estimated project end date. Projects must conclude by end or beginning of June 2019.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully that doesn't make it. Let me back up a little bit. If that were to make a big difference, we can have exceptions to those rules. These are just sort of rules of thumb. So technically, it's the end of June 2019. That's when we anticipate the contract ending. But in reality, you probably want to wrap up the work by the beginning of June 2019, because there's going to be some work that you'll need to do around providing us with data about the impact of your project and submitting your final report and things like that. So, you know, we would recommend that by the beginning of June that it's wrapped up. But if for some reason, like let's just say, for example, that you were planning on the calendar year of a school, and that school happened to be in session through the end of June 2019, that's perfectly okay to do that.
Can you share the list of the judging panel, names of all members with titles, expertise?
Yeah, so this touches on a question that was asked earlier. I think what we'll do is we'll make sure that there's a link posted to get you to the page that has the bios of the Mayor's Tech Council. But just to reiterate, all of that information is available at innovatesac.org.
Should we include personal bios when answering who is the project's leadership team involved with this project?
Yeah, I'd have to see what the question.
It has just who's the project leadership team.
Yeah, no, bios aren't necessary. If you can squeeze in a couple of lines, that might be helpful. I would just change the terminology around personal bios to professional bios. We're definitely more interested in the type of work that you've done rather than sort of your personal background. So yeah.
With regard to the requested reference letters, are these intended to be references for the organization or for the specific individuals involved in the organization? Any guidance as to which reference letter authors would be better than others, for example, from within Sacramento?
So just to clarify, we're not asking for letters, we're asking for names and contact information. And that's something that we would be doing in the due diligence process through contracting, just to make sure that if there's any questions about your application, that all of that, you know, was presented accurately, and that the people could really, the references can testify to sort of your work ethic and ability to deliver on projects. And so whether it's an organization or the individual, I think, you know, that's just going to vary on a case-by-case basis. But I think the overarching interest here is that if you're giving us a reference with the contact information, we contact them, that they understand like who you are and what your organization does. That would be pretty important.
Next, the project is focused on Sacramento. Sacramento will offer proof of concept for the idea. After project completion, the idea will be scaled up nationwide. Sacramento will be the model. How much should we speak of nationwide scale up in the size of that market opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, that's an interesting case. I mean, it's not clear like what, if you're asking about like the percentage of your application should speak to that. I think, I'm not able to answer this question, unfortunately. I would just refer back to the criteria and then see, whether spending time answering this particular question would help with the criteria. And if you think that's the case, then maybe you should spend some time on it.
Hey, this is Louis, you guys. Just heard that question, and I would point back to the word count limit that you have in describing what your project is, and just keep that in mind. So if in 300 words you're able to describe the market size, fine. But really make sure that you use those words to truly get across what your project is trying to accomplish.
Is the pitch event already scheduled? If so, when? We have a tentative date. It'll all kind of coincide with how many projects we receive and how long it kind of takes, or how many applications we receive and how long it takes to go through them and score them and review them. So we are estimating that the pitch event will be on June 4th. However, that may shift depending on the number of applications we receive and giving them their due diligence. So to be clear, you are not requesting letters of recommendation, rather references with contact information.
That's correct.
Yes. All right. That looks like the last question. Are there any more before we close out? All right. Doesn't look like it. So thank you guys for tuning in. This link that was used for the workshop will also be the link that you can find it at afterwards. And you can always use our Q&A feature online to continue asking questions. Thank you for tuning in, and we will look forward to reading your applications.